This whole VR versus screens situation is starting to become a bit of an internal conflict. Now, I've covered this with the original Pimax Crystal, but here we are again with the Crystal Light. So what are the updates or the downgrades? And is it finally time to ditch the triple 55-inch 4K monitor setup? Pimax did send this Crystal Light out for testing and review, but have no influence on this video. So the Pimax Crystal gets some big upgrades. Well, technically things were taken away for some weight savings, but essentially a combination of changes that make what I think how it should have been from the very start. First off, this is no longer a standalone VR headset, meaning PC VR only. And this also leads me to the fact that we no longer have these big bulky batteries on the back that need changing like every 6 to 8 hours. But we've also lost the counterbalance that provided. The next major difference is the foveated rendering and eye tracking. The original Crystal had eye tracking, which would allow a higher resolution rendered area to just like follow your eyes around. So we've lost that. We still have foveated rendering, but it's just fixed position. Next on the hit list is the difference on the diagonal FOV, moving down to 120. So we've lost about 10 degrees there. We lose the auto IPD adjustment, but honestly, I couldn't care less about that. I'm the only one that wears this headset, so once it's dialed in, it ain't moving anyway. The external design also has some changes. We now have this sort of wider head strap, and the padding to the back has also been updated. But unfortunately, we still have those old dodgy speakers. So after all of those things, the weight has now reduced by 30%-ish. Is it still a heavy headset? Absolutely. Can you tell the difference when wearing it or picking it up? I'd say yes, you can. Let me know in the comments if you reckon the 300 gram weight saving was worth taking away all of those little bits. But don't forget that the price has been slashed, coming down to about $600 US. So you have to keep that in mind. So does all of that combined with the new Pimax Play software, like everything together, make me want to jump ship from the triples? I'm going to summarise my feelings into these points. The first thing is the depth perception and the spatial awareness is amazing. Nothing can compete with it. The only thing I felt was a little restrictive was the FOV and the peripheral vision. Yes, you can of course turn your head, but in some ways it still feels like you're looking through a set of binoculars. Whereas with the triple 55s, I feel like I've got an all-round 200 degrees peripheral vision. Next would have to be the maximum amount of time I could spend in VR is about maybe an hour and a half. After that amount of time with the headset on, I was just getting a little uncomfortable. Eye strain or fatigue starts to set in, and a little physical discomfort. And that takes me on to the resolution. Now, as high as the resolution is, and people may argue with me here, but physical monitors still give off a far higher, more detailed display of what a flight simulator can offer. I'm keen to hear people's thoughts on that, so leave your 2 cents in the comments. Then there's the Pimax Play software. And in particular, the way DCS and Microsoft Flight Simulator work with VR. It's now just simple to set up and use. It's definitely come a long way in that sense. It's more stable and usable than it's ever been, and it's only getting better. Did I miss pushing physical buttons? Absolutely. Having to use the mouse to touch buttons and rotate dials, it's not great. It can make for a bit of a frustrating experience in Microsoft Flight Simulator, but not as frustrating in DCS, as my hands are always on the HOTAS most of the time. When it comes to looking and seeing things inside the cockpit, it is harder to see the avionics. The resolution is great, don't get me wrong. No matter what way you want to frame it, it can't compete with seeing and touching physical screens and controls. Using the Comfort face cushion, which I've got installed here, makes a big difference, but I felt that I lost some FOV. I think my eyes were just like further from the lenses. Leading on from that, the redesign of the back works better, and you can actually position it where in a way that the load is kind of taken away from your face. So the comfort and the fit is better than the original Crystal. Tracking was sometimes an issue. I didn't find much drift, but sometimes it could feel a little jerky. Keeping those key points in mind, it's taking me back to the original question. Can it beat triple screen setup? As much as VR is slowly drawing me in, and the Pimax Crystal Light is doing that, and I do use it more than I used to. With a new lighter headset, the software updates, I'm reaching for it now more than ever. But it's still lacking in clarity and comfort of a traditional screen setup. The fact that I feel a sense of relief after taking the headset off, say after an hour or so, kind of tells me everything I need to know. But I keep coming back to it. There's something there, something that makes it so enticing to put it on. I guess one of the bigger things when comparing to the triple setup you see here is the variety of aircraft I can now fly. It's freeing in a sense. With the triple setup, I'm kind of confined to GA planes with a G1000, which is by design because I like flying that kind of stuff. But when I put on the Pimax Crystal Light, it feels like a world of opportunity just opens up. The sense of being in the plane is amazing. The depth perception is incredible, and it's hard to explain to people that have never used VR how gobsmacking this really is. When you're 1,500 feet, you feel like you're 1,500 feet. If you're coming in for a hard landing, it feels like you're gonna slam the deck. And it really shines in situations where you need that depth perception. It can make the sim feel very exciting. And in some ways, when you fly in certain locations with great scenery, it almost feels like you've been there in real life. And that's something that a screen setup, no matter what the size is or how it's configured, it'll never do that for you. And it's for this reason I think I'm being drawn back into using a VR headset. But at the same time, after every session in VR, I'm reminded why my triple screen setup can't be beat for now. Touching physical knobs and dials, the peripheral vision, the comfort and the clarity of 4K displays, it might not be as immersive, but when you put it all together, it's just more enjoyable. And this is where I'm now torn. What Pimax are doing right now with the software and the hardware is incredible. And at the price it's now offered at, it's crazy to think where we are. I think the time is coming when triple displays will be obsolete, but it's not quite yet. This changes, however, when we're talking about combat sims. The extra situational awareness makes it a no-brainer. I think that the fact that you have your hands on a HOTAS most of the time makes it feel a bit more intuitive. DCS is taken to a completely new level with VR, and particularly the Pimax Crystal Light, as you can read all the gauges and displays without having to zoom in. Still, going back to a screen setup, yes, you are going to get more sharpness and fidelity from it, but this is doing enough to be able to read everything you need to within DCS. In a nutshell, for me, if I could only have one setup, I'd still go with the big triple screens over VR. However, this tech is evolving rapidly, but my gut feeling is that once they fix the discomfort and fatigue issues that plague a lot of people and increase the FOV a little bit whilst increasing the sweet spot and maybe a resolution bump, when they manage to do this, and I don't think it's far off, that's when you might see a few 55-inch Hisense TVs on eBay. But for now, I'll stick to Microsoft Flight Simulator with the big triple setup, and I'll stick to DCS and the combat sims inside VR.